any further ado, because we are a bit delayed, I would like to introduce to you one of the original attendees of our forum, who has moved on in his government career to bigger and better things. Stephen Burns is the Director for Energy Security for the Climate and Energy Directorate of the National Security Council, and that is the White House. In his role, he acts as a key liaison with senior leadership across multiple government agencies, the private sector, and foreign government counterparts in shaping energy security and clean energy policies. Prior to joining the NSC, he served as the Chief of Energy and Infrastructure in the Bureau for Europe and Eurasia and the United States Agency for International Development. In his role there, he managed and supported over $650 million in technical assistance programs and projects in 10 countries of the former Soviet Union and Southeast Europe, closely collaborating with counterparts in the EU member states, as well as the US Department of State and the Department of Energy. For over 25 years of experience he's had in the energy sector, and in prior work in the public sector, he specializes in asset development, power sector commercial, technical due diligence, energy efficiency, and green power strategies. His CV is extensive. He holds a BS from Carnegie Mellon University in mechanical engineering and public policy, and an MS in mechanical engineering from the University of Massachusetts, and a PhD in engineering management from the George Washington University. Okay, that's a mouthful. But last but not least, and those of you who are here the first year know this, but many of you do not, he's also a native of Titusville, Pennsylvania. And so, without any more of my hot air, I'd like to invite up to the podium Dr. Stephen Burns. Come on up, Stephen.
Thank you. I put some notes down. Hopefully, I won't have to refer to them too much, as my eyesight is beginning to fail as time moves on. So, it's great to be back here. It's really great to come back to northwestern Pennsylvania. I do have to start with one thing. I have to start this just about every speech with this. I'm here in my personal capacity. I very much appreciate the lengthy introduction. As we are moving into election season, just to make public speeches easier, I do all of my public appearances in my personal capacity, so anything I say here is just my experience over the past 20 plus years. Does not reflect administration policy, and just that for the record. So, where to start? Obviously, when it comes to energy and climate policy, we're in the right place. Obviously, the birth of the oil industry, Western Pennsylvania, the first civilian nuclear facility, and now you see on the drive up here all the new clean energy facilities on the way up. So this is really the appropriate place to have the conversation. I'm really pleased to see too how over the past couple years this has really grown. And in case folks doubt it, when I told people where I work, and I work with people across the world, I work with people throughout the United States, a lot of colleagues from the West Coast, from Texas. When they ask where I'm from, I just used to get lazy and say Pittsburgh. It wasn't worth trying to explain small towns in Western Pennsylvania, but then people started to prod me a little bit and say, no, really, where? And so when I would say Titusville, without fail, oh, I know where that is. All right, now they couldn't quite place it, but they knew why. They knew the few sentences in the history book, or they read Daniel Yergin's book, and so they know of the region. So just take that with you, right? That the region here is a known commodity, right? So if I could leave anything with you, it's that Titusville's known honestly around the world. So the name might not come to people, but this region of the country is known, and so I just wanted to start with that before I get into the remarks. So I really struggled too when Andrew asked if I would come back this year, because honestly, as one who does a lot of work in energy market development, small scale energy sector work, and so on, it really doesn't get you a lot of party invites. It's not, it's just not the most interesting of topics, and so getting a chance to stand up here for 15 minutes and explain, what I do was just a delight. And I think what I would like to do, though, is share with you like some of the experiences I've had and how that might inform the conversation today. And you know, the panel is quite diverse. I don't think I'm going to add a lot of new facts over what you'll hear on the panels, okay? But if I could leave you with one thing, it's that really as I do my work around the world, it's a plea for really American leadership as we move into this energy transition. Because, you know, as I'll get to in a few of my remarks, we've led through past transitions, and I really think we're well positioned to lead in this one. So, okay. So when I look to the climate and energy sort of dilemma, as Andrew phrased it, and on my darkest of days, it really seems to me at times to be this insurmountable problem. When we look to the environmental damage, we look to the changing climate. But then we have to balance that against the true costs of the transition, okay? And it's really hard to get into that conversation, and the one thing I vow to myself is I would not stand up here and use platitudes to express my point. I really kind of want to get into some of the stories, right? You know, so on the one hand, what we really do need to recognize is not just to speak to the platitudes of how the transition will bring affordable energy to all, how it will lead to a cleaner climate and so on, but we need to address the fact that we're asking communities in some extent to not monetize a resource they have. That's a tension we need to be aware of, right? We need to be aware of the fact that new transmission lines, new energy sector development, it costs money. There's debt service on that. That's something that I run into in my job at USAID when I was doing it, right, was trying to encourage communities to move to a cleaner energy system. You're comparing that to a fully depreciated asset, right, to a coal plant, to some other facility that's been running for 20, 30 plus years. There's no more debt service left. By definition, any new facility is going to cost more. Right? And so that then becomes almost a fait accompli to keep with the old asset, because the cost to the consumer by definition is going to have to rise to pay off that new facility. So we just need to recognize that the transition isn't going to be free. It's not going to be low cost, right? But when we start to roll in the environmental costs, the societal costs, those are the externalities that we need to start taking into account as we get into the transition, and as we try to evaluate some of the options. So that's just the point. I want to pay respect to that issue. I don't want to just shunt it aside as there needs to be a transition to cleaner energy sources. So that's the point I wanted to make at the start. And so that leads me to some extent my first point, which is maybe a bit intuitive, right? And that's that energy and climate issues, right? They're global, they're intertwined, they're not easy to solve, right? And they're really, really hard to understand. So as Andrew mentioned, I do a lot of my work in Eastern Europe. I still do in my job at the NSC. When I go back to 2022, 2023, right, or I will even start in 2021, there's this issue of the global energy crisis, right, that came up. And the narrative that was often told in Europe and elsewhere, right, was that the Russian invasion of Ukraine led to a shortage of natural gas in Europe, which led to a global supply glut, or sorry, the exact opposite, a global supply shortage, right, which raised prices. And that could be the furthest from the truth, because a lot of pipeline flow was still going through Ukraine. So when we look at the interconnection globally, right, now there are others out here in the audience, right, that can speak to this far better than I, okay? But when we look at what's going on globally, right, you saw the economies waking up post-COVID. So you saw greater demand around the world, okay? You saw hydropower problems in Brazil. So Brazil was having to pull more natural gas, right? So there was less available demand, right, to go to Europe, okay? There were also droughts in China at the same time. The United States, we had supply problems in Texas. Okay, there were heat waves in Europe and China as well that were raising air conditioning demand. So this is all coming together, right, that led to this overall shortage. And then in Europe, in the hottest summer it had, all the winds in the North Sea died. So Europe is now pulling all of its gas out of storage in advance of winter. Okay, so that led to massive price spikes, 2.5, 3 times typical average, right? So it's not just one area that affected it all. And again, this is, to many here, probably patently obvious, right? So when I speak to American leadership, a point I want to make, well, 2. 1, we weren't insulated from that. Price went up here as well. It went up, I think, 2 times. I'm trying to think, I can't remember what Henry Hub prices were. So I see Andrew shaking his head, I'll take that as yes. So it went up 2 times here, right? So we weren't insulated. It didn't last as long. It wasn't as sharp, okay? But it still went up here, right? I mentioned the leadership point. What did we do as the US? We started rerouting cargoes to Europe, right? That helped Europe get through the winter, and it helped bring down those price spikes. And now US LNG is one of the main suppliers to Europe. So it's a major market. So in a way that just became sort of the global perfect storm. So now I mentioned here that we're a little bit insulated here. The United States has abundant natural resources. We have 2 oceans on each side. We're relatively well defended. Okay, so why do we care, right? I mean, I tried to get the all the facts and figures, but then I realized that would lead to, as Andrew said, people checking their phones, right? But just in brief, right? So we're the top oil producer. We're by far the top natural gas producer. We're 4th or 5th in coal production. We're 2nd in renewables. Seems like we got it pretty good here, right? And we absolutely do, okay? But as I said, we're not completely insulated, okay? And I mentioned too, right? So I'm bringing up the fossil fuel points here. To my clean energy friends, I want to note here that this isn't just a fossil fuel oriented issue, okay? We are at a moment now where and I'm sure one of the panels is going to get into this, right? The new supply struggle is going to be about critical minerals, okay? And I've got a lot of people in my office working on that issue about securing rights, okay? So be it lithium, cobalt, copper, nickel, whatnot, right? All important for electrical conductor, batteries, and so on, okay? And while the United States has reserves here, we by far are not the global leaders like we were in the prior energy sources, okay? So where are we looking? We're looking to Central Africa. We're looking to South America, the Andes, and so on, right? And there is tremendous global competition for locking up these resources. China is one that often comes up. So this gets me back to my point, though, okay, about American leadership. Historically, we have been really good at bringing together coalitions, okay? I mentioned Ukraine, right? Look at the leadership that came in our response to Ukraine, okay? There are 45 countries at a minimum working together with us on sanctions regimes with Russia, on supplying materials and equipment to Ukraine. I spend a lot of my days working on moving electrical equipment to Ukraine. We've got plenty of countries doing that. We've got the UN, we've got Japan, we've got all of the European countries are all moving equipment into Ukraine. We're working with Korea as well to move material in. And a lot of that comes from the leadership shown here by the United States. So again, it becomes a global issue, right? And it becomes an area where the US can lead. So this is all just sort of getting to background to the points I wanted to make. I want to get back to something Andrew said right at the very beginning, okay? Which is we're supposed to disagree. I'm generally the cynic, okay? I'm the naysayer, right? So this was set up perfectly for me because now a lot of where folks would take the conversation here is to, again, the high-minded things we should be striking to achieve. So let me take the other tack and tell you all the things I've learned we shouldn't do, okay, if it comes to moving into a transition. And by the way, someone in the back, give me a wave, right, because I'm trying to cut time here, okay? So when I look about, all right, I don't want to talk about all of the wonderful technologies that are out there, all the ways we can reduce energy use and so on. So here. When it comes to how are we going to get through the transition, how are we going to show leadership, okay? Number 1, I think what we have to do is start setting aside a lot of our concerns and a lot of the conversation around non-compliance, okay? Or free riders, okay? Or some here would call it like the first actor disadvantage, right? In my prior life when I was doing project development, it was all about the first renewable producer was going to pay for the transmission line, and then other free riders would come in, right? I think what we need to do is set some of that aside, okay? I hear a lot of concerns about China and about the unfairness of the U.S. taking economic steps when perhaps the Chinese or others aren't. Now, again, I want to pay homage to that. I see the concern, okay? I don't want to diminish it, okay? But when you look to the net positives of being a first actor, I think it overcomes that. Okay, and I really appreciate hearing what some of the panels have to say about that. So when you aggregate up all of the renewable policies, or all of the clean energy policies, the net zero policies that you see around the world getting to 2050, okay, there are 100, 200 trillion. It gets to a point that it's monopoly money. You can't really estimate it at this point, but there are trillions upon $1 trillion of investment opportunities that are out there, right, in this transition. Okay, now I'm not saying don't monetize the resource we have, but what I'm saying is looking forward, right, looking forward to that transition. So that's the point I want to make, is looking forward to the opportunity, which again is something that's been done here in Western Pennsylvania for quite some time. Okay? The other point I already touched on, which is that the power sector is going to have to upgrade ultimately anyway. When you look at the generation fleet in the United States, it's been slowly renewing itself. You're seeing a lot of the coal plants retire and so on. So we're at that point where we can take advantage, right, and look to those other technologies. Okay, and going back to my development work, a point I want to make is when I am looking to work with smaller countries that are trying to integrate variable renewable resources, okay, I look to American suppliers. And the reason I look to American suppliers is not because I worked at USAID, it's because American suppliers were the best. When it comes to transmission and distribution technologies, when it comes to SCADA systems and so on, it was the American suppliers that were always the best at coming in, getting the systems installed, doing the training, working with the partners, and getting the system actually implemented. There is a competitive advantage to be had there, okay? The Chinese are gonna beat us on price. They absolutely are, but not on quality, not on training, and not on getting it installed. So that would be my takeaway there. Ultimately, again, and I don't want to promote policies, okay, you know, you look to the Europeans looking at carbon border adjustment mechanisms and so on. There are policy ways to overcome that. So that's issue number one. That's one thing not to do, okay. All right, number two, okay, don't focus on one area only, okay. And this is a mistake I have seen throughout my entire career. When I look to Western assistance, Western energy policy, it almost invariably focused on supply side, invariably. Okay, it was about finding new gas and oil fields. When it came to donor support, it was about building new power plants. It was always about getting megawatts into the system. Great, those are easy to count. So as one who worked in a donor agency and who was subject to government accounting, I'd love to be able to count the number of megawatts I got in a system. Wonderful, right? I could show megawatt per dollar add, right? But in the end, what did the Russians do in Eastern Europe? What did they do? They started putting in shell trading companies. They started buying up the distribution companies. Where does the real power come? I realized the pun as I was saying it, that's why I paused, I'm sorry. Right, in an electric sector, okay? It comes from the distribution company because that's where money enters the system, right? That last mile where the customers are paying for the power, right? So, what do we try to do, right? Or when you look at what the Europeans do with their clean energy plans, it's all about new transmission. It's all about security of supply, new pathways, routing power, right? It's not only about fuel source and megawatts. Those are important. I don't want to discount it, but what I'm saying is we need to broaden the thinking to include those other areas. Okay. I only have five not to do, so I'm looking back at the time. Okay. Number three is misunderstanding the goal, okay? And this is something, I'm not going to tell you what the goal is, okay? I looked at the panels for that, but I will use an example, okay? So I work in energy security. Almost every country I worked in misunderstood the difference between energy independence and energy security, okay? So I work in small countries in Southeast Europe. Every country wants to make sure it has enough generation in its own country to cover all of its needs. Okay, I sit there, I talk to the deputy prime ministers, I talk to the ministers of energy. They want to build new power plants. They don't care that it's going to increase their price 3 times over, okay? When the simple fact is all they need is a short transmission line to hook into the 400 kV line the next country over, be part of the pan-European market, and its power prices are going to be less. I actually had a nice older gentleman tell me once when I was talking about the need to better integrate into the market that was the absence of a strategy. He looked at me like, that's such a quaint idea that you would want to do that. But the point is, there are other pathways to get there. So again, don't misunderstand the goals here, right? So, okay. Don't hear what you want to hear. That's my other thing, okay? So again, I'll go back to my work experience, okay? Our adversaries know our weaknesses. Let's keep that in mind. And to be clear, we have adversaries around the world, okay? And so here's an example where I'll flip it back to the clean energy side. So doing a lot of work, okay? I can remember where we lost an opportunity to extract natural gas in Romania because environmental NGOs came in with an anti-fracking campaign, okay? Seemed logical, okay? You look back at it, it was Gazprom funded, okay? The environmental campaign. So just keep that in mind. Keep in mind where some of the advocacy is coming from. We see the same thing in the Republic of Georgia that's trying to expand its hydro capability. Okay, we see environmental NGOs being funded by those that don't want to bring new generation, right, into the country for varying reasons. So again, keep in mind the agenda of those that are coming to you. So that would be my other point. Okay. Number 5. Again, I'm cutting this really short. I see nervousness back there. So, number 5. Okay, and that is the demanding of an all or nothing approach. And I see that too much. To Andrew's point, in Washington, I see it all the time. We're either supportive of natural gas or we're supportive of renewables or something. Okay, look, there's a reason net zero goals are 2050. Okay, there's a reason that there is when we look to some of our support globally and all of the above approach. What we're trying to do is to make sure that the United States is best positioned, or what we should be trying to do is best positioned for what the energy sector of the future is going to be. Okay, and so to me, the dialogue that is focused on one versus the other tends to not be helpful, and it tends to cause division, right? Rather than moving towards what makes an appropriate overall response. Okay, so on that, maybe I can wrap. Okay, on that, just say, look, the world is increasingly interdependent, right? Now, I guess I am lapsing into platitude with that one, right? Right. Okay, so society's become increasingly interdependent. Okay, it's brought new opportunities, right? But at the same time, it's brought new risks. Okay, natural disasters don't respect borders. Okay, shortages don't respect borders as well. Okay, but the key to maximizing human welfare, right, will be if we're finding a way to work together, right, with our allies overseas, with those whose supply chains, right, we are trying to interact with, right? That's why we're doing so much work with, again, as I mentioned earlier, Central Africa and South America. So it's a global response. Okay, you can keep coming. I'm almost done. Okay. All right. So to me, I'll just sum up then with the 4 lessons here. Right, it's a global issue whether we like it or not, and we can't concern ourselves with the free riders. We have to be looking forward. Okay, and we should not forget what our end game is: that secure, cleaner, reliable, affordable energy. Okay. Keep in mind what our adversaries are looking to do and how they're looking to shift our own dialogue internally for their benefit, okay? And then just avoid the noise, right? Avoid those that are claiming the absolutes, okay? Because look, the US, we can lead. We can work with our counterparts to lead through this, right? We've got the resources, we have the entrepreneurial drive, okay? We have the political weight to bring together the coalitions to work together, okay? But the key is we need to stay engaged, okay? So I really gave you like the half version of that, so I hope I didn't go too far into too many things, and with that I would thank you very much for your time. I really did enjoy coming back here, and Next year, maybe you give me like a 5-minute slot and I can be a bit more succinct. How about that?